The air didn't just burn, it screamed. A concussive wave of superheated plasma slammed into the magnetic barrier, turning the world into a kaleidoscope of blinding violet and white. Sergeant Thorne didn't flinch. He leaned into the impact, his boots locking magnetically to the trembling floor plates, his armored bulk becoming the only thing standing between total annihilation and the crystalline entity cowering behind him. Logic dictated flight. Humanity chose the fight. Thorne could feel the radiant heat bleeding through his kinetic shielding, a sensation that would have sent any other species in the Galactic Council running for the escape pods. But Thorne was a product of Sol 3. He was a death worlder. His heart rate didn't spike out of panic. It surged with the deliberate, heavy rhythm of a war drum. He looked back, just for a fraction of a second, catching the terrified fracture of light in Matriarch Celia's faceted eyes. "Don't move," he growled, the vocalizer in his helmet turning the command into a tectonic rumble. "I am the wall." The shield generator on his forearm whined, a high-pitched death rattle indicating catastrophic failure was seconds away. This was the moment where the script of this science fiction story was supposed to end in tragedy. But Thorne wasn't reading a script, he was rewriting it in real time. 3 hours earlier, the Cinder Gorge had been deceptively calm. The diplomatic convoy had been a gleaming procession of anti-grav skiffs cutting through the jagged russet canyons of the neutral zone. It was supposed to be a boring assignment, the kind of mission reserved for the end of a tour. Thorne had been walking alongside Xylia's personal transport, feeling ridiculously overarmed compared to the sleek, fragile elegance of her Vitri honor guard. The Vitri were beautiful, beings of living silica and light, but they looked like they would shatter if someone sneezed too hard. To the Vitri, Thorne was a brute, a space orc. That was the derogatory slang the elegant species used for humans when they thought the translators were off. They viewed the Terran spirit not as a virtue, but as a biological glitch and aggressive redundancy evolved on a planet that actively tried to kill its inhabitants. "You scan the perimeter with excessive frequency, Sergeant," Celia had noted earlier, her voice chiming directly into his neural link. Her facets shifted, reflecting the harsh sunlight of the canyon. "The probability of engagement is statistically negligible." Thorne had adjusted the grip on his pulse rifle, his eyes hidden behind his polarized visor. "Statistics don't account for greed, Your Grace, or stupidity." She had tilted her head, a gesture of alien curiosity. "Is that why the Council fears your kind? Because you ignore the math?" "Because we changed the equation," Thorne had replied. He hadn't known how prophetic those words would be until the canyon walls erupted. It wasn't a warning shot. It was an execution order. Mercenary gunships, painted in the chaotic colors of the Rim syndicates, crested the ridgeline and rained hellfire down on the procession. The initial volley vaporized the lead and rear escorts instantly. The logic of the Vitri honor guard kicked in immediately. Their combat algorithms calculated the survival probability, found it to be 0, and dictated the only rational course of action: retreat to preserve the genetic data. In a blur of light, the elite alien guards vanished, engaging their personal blink drives to teleport to safety, leaving their matriarch exposed in the burning wreckage of her transport. The guards abandoned her to live. The enemy stayed to die. Thorne saw the mercenaries descending, their thrusters kicking up clouds of red dust. They were looking for loot, for a hostage, for an easy kill. They saw a lone human standing amidst the burning debris, a relic of a species known for its inexplicable human ingenuity and stubbornness. They saw an apex predator backed into a corner. Thorne didn't run. He vaulted over the burning chassis of the skiff, grabbed the frozen, terrified matriarch, and hauled her into the only cover available, a shallow depression beneath a fallen slab of rock. The sheer proximity was electric, the clash of his hardened ceramic armor against her delicate, vibrating form creating a stark contrast of materials. "Stay down," Thorne ordered, checking the charge on his rifle. The dust swirled around them, thick with the smell of ozone and burnt metal. "Why did you not flee?" Xylia's voice was a jagged frequency of shock. "My guards, the math." "To hell with the math," Thorne snapped, leveling his weapon at the approaching silhouettes. "This is HFY 101, Your Grace. We don't leave people behind." The shield generator died with a shriek of overloaded capacitors, vanishing into a wisp of ozone. Thorne didn't hesitate. He slammed his shoulder into the rock face, forcing Xylia deeper into the recess, and turned his back to the inferno. Peace forged not by treaties, but by one soldier's stubborn refusal to quit. The first plasma bolt struck his backplate with the force of a sledgehammer, cracking the ceramic coating. Thorn grunted, the sound wet and heavy, but he didn't fold. He became a fixed point in the chaotic universe, a monolith of Terran spirit refusing to yield to the physics of the situation. He fired blindly over his shoulder, the recoil of his rifle vibrating through his bones, a rhythmic counterpoint to the erratic thumping of his heart. Cilia stared up at him, her crystalline form resonating with the tremors of the impacts absorbing into his armor. She saw the stress fractures appearing on his helmet, the way his muscles locked rigid to keep him upright against the onslaught. This was the apex predator the galaxy feared. He wasn't hunting, he was shielding. He was enduring agony to protect a creature who was, biologically and politically, a stranger. "Go!" Thorn roared, his voice cracking as another round slammed into his thigh, spinning him halfway around. He recovered instantly, planting a boot to stabilize. The mercenaries were closing in, confident in their victory. They had the numbers, they had the firepower, but they had forgotten the variable of human ingenuity. Thorn wasn't just taking fire. He was calculating. He pulled a thermal detonator from his belt, not to throw at them, but to throw at the cliff face above the enemy advance. He primed it and hurled it with the last reserves of his strength. The explosion wasn't designed to kill, it was designed to blind. A landslide of shale and dust cascaded down, creating a momentary wall of cover. In that brief respite, a signal pierced the chaos. High above, aboard the retreating Vitri shuttle, the honor guard watched the telemetry feed. They watched the logic of self-preservation crumble before the illogical data of self-sacrifice. They saw a death welder bleeding out for their matriarch. The data didn't compute, and yet the conclusion was undeniable. If a Space Orc could defy death for their leader, their flight was not just logical, it was shameful. With a sound like tearing silk, 3 Vitri warriors blinked back into existence, materializing directly into the fray. They didn't calculate odds this time. They moved with a fluidity that matched Thorn's brutality, their energy lances humming as they formed a phalanx around the fallen human and their queen. Thorn slumped against the rock, his vision blurring. He felt a cool, smooth hand on his armored gauntlet. He looked down to see Xylia, her light pulsing with a warm golden hue, the Vitri sign of deep emotional resonance. "You are damaged," she stated, though the clinical words carried a tremor of something new, something human, just a scratch. Thorn wheezed, watching the Vitri guards dismantle the remaining mercenaries with terrifying precision. The skirmish ended as quickly as it had begun. The silence that followed wasn't heavy. It was charged with a newfound understanding. The matriarch didn't pull away from his touch. Instead, she leaned closer, her faceted eyes reflecting his battered helmet. "You stayed," she whispered. "The Galactic Council calls you monsters. They are wrong." Thorn managed a crooked smile beneath his visor. "We're whatever we need to be, Your Grace." The war between Sol 3 and the Vitri didn't end that day because of a signed document in a sterile room. It ended because a single soldier showed the galaxy that humanity's greatest weapon wasn't its aggression, but its capacity to bleed for those who couldn't. The cultural bridge had been built, paved with spent brass and scorched armor, anchored by the impossible weight of a promise kept. Thorn closed his eyes, letting the adrenaline fade, listening to the hum of the Vitri healing beams knitting the air together. The math had changed, and the universe would never be the same.